worked out a lot. I went to the gym, I lifted weights, I did yoga, I ran, spin classes. I did a lot. But for a few years, I would get a cold and then my cough would just hang around. It went from a lingering cough to being quite disruptive. And they sent me for x rays, lung tests, allergy tests, you name it, everything. They told me there's nothing wrong with you. In November of 2018, I was in tears. They sent me for another x ray and I left the hospital to go back to work. I literally was out on the pavement in front of the hospital when they called me and they said, "Can you come back?" I said, "Well, there's a little shadow."
Nichol, who was finally diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer. Have a watch of what happened to her and how she was finally taken seriously. Patient Voices is proudly supported by sponsors who have no editorial control over the content. Hi, everyone. My name is Yvonne Diaz. I'm a co-founder of Oncogene Cancer Research. I'm also a stage 4 lung cancer patient. Today's guest is Nichol, who has been living with lung cancer for quite a number of years now. So, Nichol, tell us what was going on. What was your life like? And what made you think that something was wrong?
I was working full time, happy in my job. I was very social. I had friends that I would hang out with on the weekends and in the evenings. And my husband and I did a lot together and was also in a choir, which I was really excited about. I worked out a lot. I went to the gym, I lifted weights, I did yoga, I ran, spin classes. I did a lot. And it's something that kind of developed over time. So I've always had bronchial infections and things like that. Like it was common for me to get those. But for a few years, what would happen is I would get a cold and then my cough, like a lot of people, would just hang around. And over time, it would hang around for longer and longer and longer. And I think I first went to my doctor in 2013 because it was just it wasn't going away. It was more than a few weeks. It was a long time. By 2015, finally sent me for x-rays because it was starting to become disruptive. It went from a lingering cough to being quite disruptive. And they sent me for x-rays, looked at my x-rays in 2015, said there's nothing sinister there. So they gave me lung tests, allergy tests, you name it, everything, nothing. So they started prescribing me inhalers, like steroid inhalers. And it did help, but it stopped helping after a while. And between 2015 and 2018, I don't know how many times I went to the doctor complaining about it, talking about how disruptive it was. And I do feel I was quite a bit of a nuisance. By November, my cough was still hanging around and I was coughing hundreds and hundreds of times a day. So much to where I was becoming incontinent. I couldn't be in a meeting at work or on a phone call with a client without having a coughing fit. We couldn't watch movies. Like it was really disruptive. And my husband wanted me to go to the doctor. And I was like, "Oh, they're just going to give me inhalers." They literally said to me, "There's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes people just need to live with these things." And because I felt like I'd been quite forceful, and that's what they still told me, I was like, okay, well, I guess they've done all the tests. There's nothing I can do. But by November of 2018, I was in tears. Like I was like, I can't live like this anymore. And I went to my doctor and I was just like, please, you have to help me. My life is impacted so severely that I'm really struggling to psychologically cope with this. So they sent me for another x-ray. So I get to the hospital and the technician said, "You've already had this x-ray in 2015. We don't do x-rays more than once." So I argued again and they finally gave me the x-ray and I left the hospital to go back to work. I literally was out on the pavement in front of the hospital when they called me and they said, "Can you come back?" They said, "Well, there's a little shadow there, but we just think it's your nipple. So we want to mark it to make sure." So I go back to the hospital and I do the x-ray again, but this time they literally took a paper clip and put it around my nipple to mark it to make sure that was the shadow. But then they had me go wait in a waiting room. And that was like at 10, 11 in the morning. I think they gave me an MRI at that stage, but then sent me back into the waiting room by 7 p.m. So I was there all day. By 7 p.m., they came in and said, "Can you come back tomorrow morning?" And I was like, "Why?" And they said, "Well, we don't have anybody here to go over your results with you, but if you can come back tomorrow morning at 9, we'll have somebody here." I was, like, really irritated because my whole day spent in an A&E, not the funnest of places to be. And, came home, talked to my husband about it, woke up in the morning, he's like, "Do you want me to go with you?" And I went, "Nah." I was like, "I'm sure I just got bronchitis or something like that." Went back, walked into the room, and anybody who's been through this will know what I'm talking about. When you walk into a room and you see a doctor and there's somebody else in there with them. And I knew instantly that there was something different about this one. So I sat down and she showed me my scans and she said, "Do you see all this here that's lighting up? Well, that's not supposed to be there." And I was like, well, what is it?" And that was the first time the words lung cancer had been uttered to me. And she said, "They're concerned it might be lung cancer." I kind of froze and she said, "We're going to run some more tests and we hope to have some answers by the end of the year." And I panicked because I have family who've died of lung cancer, of other cancers as well. I'm not, at the time, I wasn't really educated in it. I am now. I knew time's not always on your side. It's panicked. And I just said, "I have private health care if it makes things any faster." And that was it. Bam, bam, bam. Scans, tests. Saw a pulmonologist, saw all kinds of doctors. And within 10 days, I went to go see my pulmonologist and he had my results. And my husband was with me and he said, "You have stage 3B lung cancer."
Nicole, it took 10 days in the end, but you spent 5 years in the making. So that must have been quite the shock. Like you said, even going back without your husband initially, just thinking, well, I'm a busy woman, I'm working, I got to get back to work. And
Mhm.
we're so used to not thinking it will be something serious, especially years of being told it wasn't serious,
Yeah.
right? So that also, in a way, helps you think like probably nothing. So in 10 days you had your answer. So then what happened? 3B, I mean, did that mean anything to you?
It didn't mean anything to me at the time because I didn't really know about cancer. I had an uncle who had lung cancer years ago who had passed away from it. So I didn't understand what that meant. But all I know is I just felt panic, especially when you don't know a lot about it. I just wanted to do what I needed to do. If there was something I could do quickly, like I didn't want to wait. I would have, if I would have been able to be thrown on top of an operating table right then and there, I probably would have done it. Um, but, yeah, that was pretty much it, and, yeah, it was 5 years in the making, but that changed my life pretty much forever from that point.
I remember when you found out your news on a Friday and then were on the operating table on a Monday. So you didn't have that much time to process it. You left that clinic on a Friday and what happened next?
I went home, I called my sister first and told her. I pretty much spent the weekend, comforting everyone. I didn't have any time to process it at all. In my mind, I just needed surgery and I needed to do it quickly. I knew they were going in with curative intent and that my oncologist was very hopeful about it. So I just wanted to get it done. So I don't really remember much early days because it was such a whirlwind. I started chemotherapy just less than a month later. So I was still recovering from having half of one of my lungs taken out when I started chemotherapy. And I had 4 months of chemo, if I remember right. And I started off on cisplatin, which anybody who's taken that before knows what a mess that is in your head and for your body. Then I had 6 weeks of daily radiotherapy, and, I didn't get my first scans after all of that until the summer.
Wow. So a lot of people think surgery is it, right? Like, oh, you took it out. So then hearing you also had to do chemo and radiation. How did you feel about the chemo? Because that brings up all kinds of emotions and fears. So what was that like?
Radiotherapy for me personally wasn't that bad. It was just very taxing of time and exhausting to go to, but I didn't have any problems. But the surgery felt easy in comparison to the chemotherapy. And I really prepared myself as much as I thought possible. Spoke to my nurse. I went through all the side effects and looked up people online who'd been through it. And I remember when I went in for my first session, I wore a t-shirt that was all "I got this," and I wore my Wonder Woman, Converse sneakers, and I'm telling you right now, I thought I had it. I did not have it. Like, that it cisplatin knocked me on the floor and wiped the floor with me for a good solid 2 weeks, before I started to come out of it and feel like I was part of the world again. It was very difficult, and they ended up taking me off of it after 2 cycles and putting me on carboplatin because, I started having really bad neuropathy in my feet and my hands. My kidneys did not take very well to it. I started having hearing loss, all kinds of problems. So they took me off it and put me on carboplatin, which still is no walk in the park, but it wasn't as bad as cisplatin. So it was a real eye opener what people go through
Right.
with chemotherapy, and Hollywood does not have it right. It doesn't look or anything like that. It's very different. But again, it's different for everyone.
There are so many different chemos and everyone's experience is so individual, right? And it was good that your team was able to move you on to carbo after you did have those
Yeah.
experiences because the tinnitus is can be serious and ongoing after the chemo. My goodness. So once you finished treatment, did you think, okay, I'm done now, and you moved on? I have a couple questions, and my other ones are related to
Mhm.
biomarker testing. Because did anyone speak to you about this, and had you looked at the lung cancer community and heard of these things? Because you were also in your early to mid 40s, I remember, Nicole, when you were diagnosed. So you seem to fit the profile of a woman who might have a biomarker, right?
Yeah, I didn't understand it all at the time, and everything happened so quickly. I really didn't have time to process or look into things too much. I just wanted it out. And I felt good about the team that I had, and I was like, "Give me all the drugs, give me whatever you need to do to take care of this because I want it gone." So I didn't to tell you the truth, I didn't really have time or the inclination at that period anyway to go through and look at stuff. I know I did have biomarker testing because my oncologist, when they did the surgery, they took the tissue and they ran it through everything, and I had no markers, no mutations to speak of. So, but at the time, I didn't really understand what that meant. I just kind of took it on board what he was said, and he would tell me, "This is what we can do, and this is what I think is going to take care of things." So I understood why I was going through chemotherapy. I understood why I was going through the radiotherapy, but I don't really think I got my head around everything else until my latest diagnosis when I've had to deal with it again. Everything just happened so quickly, and I just wanted it to be over with. I didn't really dip my toe into the cancer community at all. I was under treatment and couldn't do anything, and I think because I didn't really have time to process or understand what was happening to me, the thought of I don't know how to explain, the thought of, like, getting to know other people who had felt a bit daunting to me, and I also felt a bit, like, funny too. My in that sense, because I did look for a few places, like, I did find some people online that were in similar situations who, were having treatment, but not with a curative intent, and I almost felt like that wasn't really me, so I don't really belong there. I didn't really dip my toe too much in the camp. That has since changed.
That makes complete sense, and you definitely hear that. Now, also, I think one thing we spoke about is that you wanted to kind of get back to your life, right? This was a blip, and you were going through all these things, and you were super healthy beforehand. You were at the gym, super fit. Just wanted to get back to your life. And so after treatment, did you manage to do that?
My body took quite a hit from the chemotherapy and everything. I think I finished everything by the summer of June 2019. So I wasn't working at the time, and I wasn't in that great a shape. Like, I was struggling to walk around independently. My body just ached. Like, it had been through like a war. Like, it was what it felt like. Like, I just felt battered and beat. And I struggled to go up the stairs. So I needed some time to try to get that back. So I was trying to put it out of my head in the sense that, like, did that really happen to me? Like, that surely that didn't happen. I just want to get back to normal. And I started a little bit towards the end of the year, going back to the gym and doing some stuff. And then COVID hit, which is not ideal after you've had lung cancer to have a world shifting respiratory disease that just set me back quite a bit.
Wow, that's
Mm.
crazy. You were in quite a physical state, trying to come back to good health and good functioning? How did you feel with all of that? You just been through some brutal things to get this triple regimen of surgery, chemo, radiation. That's so much.
My mental health took a real hit as well because I think I didn't know what to expect. I had friends who I thought were going to be around for me who disappeared off the face of the planet. I heard from them very little at the time, but they eventually, some of them immediately disappeared, but quite a few of them slowly disappeared. And I felt quite isolated. And I think, especially out when COVID hit, I was already starting to go downhill a little bit, but by the time COVID hit, I'd hit the dumps pretty bad. I think with cancer, it doesn't matter how much support you have because I've had great support. I've had my husband who's been amazing, my sister, my best friend. I have people who've really supported me and been there for me through everything, but even with that, their experience is very different from your own, and you still feel really isolated in your experience. So I had times where I struggled to get out of bed, and I'm not exaggerating when I say for weeks at a time, and I got really depressed. My mom would be like, "Well, why aren't you happy? Why aren't you excited?" I was, but I think because I had no time to process anything and really no one to talk to aside sitting with my own thoughts for months and now going into over a year really took its toll on how I interacted with people, how I looked at life, and just how I felt, and I just was really lost for quite some time. But I eventually started seeing a therapist and a few other bits here and there, and I did pull myself out of it, but yeah, my mental health took a real hit, and I don't think people really talk about that because I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting to lose friends. My doctor at the time told me I was suffering a form of PTSD because I would. I'd wake up in the morning and I could smell the drugs, I could smell the hospital, I could see things. Sometimes I'd turn around and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd think I'd see all my medication next to me and I'd panic. I don't want to take 30 pills today, but eventually I came out of it. It took a while though.
I'm so glad you got some support both through your family, your husband, and also a therapist because it is such a big experience. And it didn't just end with your treatment, right? The stress and the post traumatic stress, as you're describing, because also you then enter this world of surveillance. So, in a way, you don't feel like you're done because then the surveillance begins. So, you started regular scans at that stage. We are going to wrap up this first stage where we're going to come back and talk a bit more about how it did come back. But I think I'd like to understand everything that was happening in this first phase where you're trying to get back to your life, aren't you?
Mm.
And it's not easy. You're dealing with this stress, this emotion, and now surveillance in a way doesn't truly help you.
I'd never heard of scanxiety, never heard of that, never really thought of it. Um, but yeah, well, that was a whole different ball game that I wasn't expecting to go through. And I remember the first time I had to go back for scans, my husband and I were convinced that it had come back. And we were so afraid to go get my results. We didn't sleep for a couple days. I was in tears when we walked in. My oncologist was like, "Why do you guys look so sad?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Your scans were great. There's nothing there." And Andy and I were like, "Are you sure? Because I got all this going on." He's like, "No, you're fine." And he said to me, and me and my husband think of this often. He said, "Even if there was something there, I would have a plan. You wouldn't be walking in to nothing. I would have a plan." And it became I don't want to say it became easier, but I try to keep that in my head every time I have a scan now. But yeah, I had scans every 3 months for a long time. Then it was every 6 months. Then it was every 9 months. And then it was every year. But I only got to do a 1 year stretch one time. And I got anxiety every single time. And I think towards the end, I started getting quite irritated. I was like, when is it going to leave my life? I just wanted it to go away. And I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to go to do scans anymore. I just wanted to live my life.
So you did reach the point where you were meant to be done with surveillance, didn't you? You were under 5 years surveillance and you got to that last result and you were told, well, look, everything's great.
I got to my 5 years, and that felt like a big milestone. But then in March of 2025, That was my 6-year anniversary, and so that was the first time I'd gone an entire year without a scan, and at this stage, I was back at work, fully back at work, I was back at the gym, I was pretty much back to most of my old routines. I was feeling pretty good. I went and had my scans and I went to see my oncologist. I had all my blood work done and he was so happy. He was so excited. He was like, your scans look great. There's nothing there. Your bloods look wonderful. Asked me what I've been doing with myself and told him. And I remember him saying, we don't like to use the word cured, but 6 years is a big milestone. No, I'm really proud and I'm really happy for you. And I was like, we too. My husband and I were like, "Let's go out and celebrate." But before I left, I did say, "I have been getting these headaches." And he was like asked me a little bit about him, and I said, "I'm sure I need new glasses." I said, I may have pulled a muscle while I was at the gym. I'm not that concerned, but I just wanted you to know." And he's like, "Ah, your bloods look great." He said, "Go ahead and, talk to your GP about it. If you're still struggling with them after amount of time, come back." And I was like, "Okay." So I left, and that was on March 11th of 2025, and in the coming weeks, things changed quite drastically.
My goodness, Nicole, that's a lot. So we are gonna end this episode here because this is really part one of what happened to you, how you were diagnosed with stage 3B. But obviously there is more to the story. So we're gonna come back and discuss what happened next. So thank you so much.
Thank you.